Hello, my dear friends. Your world is shrinking to the space between two hulls, lashed together with coconut fiber and prayer. The sun beats down, turning the salt on your skin to a fine, white powder, and the endless blue of the Pacific stretches out to a horizon that feels like the edge of the known universe. You are on a vessel that is more of a living creature than a simple boat, an ark designed not to conquer the ocean, but to ask for its permission to pass. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? But you should know, in this world, a single navigation error, a single misread swell, and you will not be found. There is no rescue helicopter, no coast guard. You probably won't survive this. But the people who made these journeys did, and their story is one of profound, quiet genius. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, imagine yourself there. Find a comfortable position. Let your own world shrink down to just the sound of my voice and the feeling of the blankets around you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The image you have in your mind of a Polynesian voyaging canoe is likely a thing of stunning beauty. You picture it in a museum hall, perhaps, or in a glossy travel documentary. Two sleek, parallel hulls carved from immense trees, their wooden surfaces polished to a warm, deep glow. They are connected by a central platform, a masterpiece of minimalist engineering. The lines are elegant, sculptural, speaking of speed and a seamless connection to the water. It looks like it was born to glide across a turquoise lagoon, a silent, graceful water strider leaving barely a ripple in its wake. This is the glamorous illusion. The canoe is a perfect, static piece of art, a testament to a romantic, seafaring past. It's the history you can display, the artifact you can admire from behind a velvet rope. It's clean, it's pristine, and it's a lie. The reality, once you're a few days out from land, is far more visceral. Let's pull back the curtain on that beautiful image. The first thing you notice isn't the sight, but the sound. This canoe is never silent. It is a symphony of groans, creaks, and strained sighs. The thousands of feet of cordage painstakingly woven from coconut husk fibers that lash the entire structure together are in a constant state of tension and release. With every wave that lifts and twists the hulls, the ropes complain. They groan like the joints of an old man getting out of a chair. They squeak and screech like a chorus of unhappy seabirds. It's not the sound of something breaking, but the sound of something living. It's the sound of sinew and ligament, of a flexible skeleton adjusting to immense, relentless pressure. A modern, rigid boat made of fiberglass or steel might feel solid, but in a truly massive sea, that rigidity becomes a fatal flaw. It fights the ocean, and eventually, the ocean wins by snapping it in two. Your canoe, this Vaka, doesn't fight. It yields. It bends. It gives. And it makes these noises to let you know it's working. Now, let's talk about the smell. That pristine, polished wood you imagined. It's now permanently damp, slick with a film of salt spray. And down in the belly of each hull, sloshing around your ankles, is the bilge. This isn't just clean seawater that's splashed over the side. It's a foul soup. It's the seawater, yes, but it's mixed with the inevitable leakage from the pandanus leaf food parcels, the sour scent of fermenting breadfruit paste, the occasional remnants of someone's seasickness, and the unavoidable reality of human waste in a very, very confined space. This stinking cocktail has to be constantly bailed out with wooden scoops, a never-ending chore that coats your hands and perfumes the air with a uniquely organic stench of survival. This isn't a yacht. It's a floating, semi-permeable campsite. The canoe feels less like a machine and more like an organism, and this bilge is its digestive fluid, a constant, unpleasant reminder of its imperfect, living nature. And why? Why build something so noisy, so flexible, so seemingly fragile and prone to such unpleasantness? Because the people who designed these vessels understood a truth that a land-based mind struggles to grasp. They knew the ocean was the dominant force. You could not command it or defeat it with brute force. To survive, you had to become like it. You had to be flexible, adaptable, resilient. The canoe's design is a physical manifestation of this philosophy. Every single lashing is a point of articulation, allowing the craft to twist and shudder, absorbing the energy of the waves and dissipating it through its entire structure. It's a creature with cartilage, not just bone. If a lashing were to fray and snap under the strain, it could be repaired at sea, a near impossible task for a crack hull on a European ship. The canoe wasn't a fortress against the water, it was a participant in the water. Its seeming imperfections, the groaning, the flexing, the constant need for bailing were the very features that made it the most successful blue water sailing craft in human history, capable of crossing thousands of miles of open ocean. It wasn't just a boat. It was a member of the family, an ancestor, a living ark. You spoke to it, you sang to it, you cared for its wounds, and you trusted its groans. You had to learn its language, its smells, its moods, because your life depended on understanding that it was alive. This canoe is a living thing, and to survive, you and everyone aboard must become part of its nervous system, an extension of its wooden skin, feeling every shudder and tremor as if it were your own. You feel it now, don't you? This groaning, flexing, stinking vessel is not just your transport, it's an extension of your own body. Its survival, and yours are one, and the same. And who guides this living creature across the void? History and Hollywood have given you a clear and powerful image. It's the master navigator, the Tufunga, a man of immense prestige and singular genius. You see him standing tall on the platform between the hulls, his silhouette dark against a sky impossibly full of stars. His hair is long, ruffled by the wind. His hand rests confidently on the massive steering paddle, feeling the waters push and pull. His eyes are fixed on a specific star, a secret point of light only he understands. He is the hero of the story, a solitary figure blessed with a sacred, mystical knowledge passed down through generations. He alone holds the map in his head. The rest of the crew, the paddlers, the bailers, the families huddled on the deck are merely passengers, placing their blind faith in this one exceptional man. He is the captain, the priest, the brain. Everyone else is just muscle and cargo. This is the glamorous illusion, navigation, as a solo performance, a feat of individual brilliance. But now, let's peer through the darkness on the deck and see the shocking reality. The master navigator is indeed there, but he is not alone in his work. He is more like a spider sitting in the center of a vast, living web, and every person on this canoe is a vibrating strand feeding him information. Look closer. Over there, lying on a woven mat near the hull, is an old woman. She is too frail to pull ropes or bail water. Her eyes are closed, but she is not asleep. She is laid out flat on the deck, her entire body, from her heels to the back of her head, pressed against the vibrating wooden planks. She is feeling the ocean. Her old, aching bones have become the most sensitive instrument on board. She can distinguish between the main, dominant swell, deep, ancient pulse of the ocean coming from 1,000 miles away and the smaller, more recent wind swells generated by local weather. She can feel the subtle interference pattern when a swell bounces off a distant, unseen island and returns as a faint, ghostly echo. She says nothing, but if the pattern changes, a slight murmur to her grandson is all the navigator needs. And see the children. They aren't just here because their families are migrating. They have a job. Their young eyes, not yet dulled by age, are constantly scanning the water. Not for islands. Not yet. They are watching for the subtle shifts in the deep blue, the faint lines of flotsam, the specific type of seaweed that only grows in certain currents. They are tasked with spotting birds, but not just any bird. Is it a frigate bird, which can roam for days far from shore, or is it a white tern, which always returns to land at night? The life of the entire community might depend on that distinction. Their game of I Spy is a critical act of data collection. At night, when you try to sleep, you see the crew taking turns in a strange ritual. They don't just curl up for warmth. They find a place to press their bodies against the hull. Some will wedge their heads into the angle where a crossbeam meets the hull. Others will lie with their backbones flush against the wood. They are sleeping, yes, but their unconscious bodies are still at work. They are learning the rhythm of the sea through their very skulls, their spines, their jawbones. The constant, rhythmic vibration of the primary swell becomes a baseline, a hum so constant it becomes part of their sleeping thoughts. If that vibration changes direction, or if a new, conflicting vibration begins, they will stir, perhaps not even knowing why. They are turning their entire bodies into a compass. So why this strange, collective effort. Why not just let the expert do his job? Because the Polynesian worldview did not place knowledge in a silo. The survival of the Vaka, the voyaging family, was a shared responsibility, not a top-down directive. The navigator's genius was not in having all the knowledge, but in his ability to synthesize it. He was the master listener. He listened to the old woman's bones, to the child's sharp eyes, to the man who trailed his hand in the water to feel for a change in temperature. He listened to the snores of the sleepers whose bodies were mapping the swells. This collective sensory input created a rich, multi-layered understanding of the ocean's language. The Western idea of a captain on his bridge, isolated by his authority, would be dangerously inefficient here. Here, everyone is on the bridge. The navigator's role was to be the quiet center, the calm mind that could take 1,000 tiny, disparate observations, a feeling, a smell, a bird call, a dream, and weave them into a single, confident course. The canoe was a living thing, and its crew was its nervous system, a single organism working in concert, feeling its way through the vast, dark water. And of all the senses the crew employed, the most important was this deep, primal feeling of the water's movement. A map that was not seen with the eyes, but felt through the body, a compass that existed not in the sky, but in the dark, rhythmic heart of the ocean itself. The feeling of the ocean's rhythm has seeped into your bones. It's no longer a strange vibration. It's a familiar, comforting pulse, the very heartbeat of your journey. And when night falls, a new map reveals itself. You look up, and the sky is a breathtaking spectacle. With no light pollution, the Milky Way is not a faint, hazy band, but a brilliant, churning river of light. The stars don't just twinkle, they burn with a cold, steady fire. This is the navigator's domain. You picture him, a heroic Tufunga, standing at the steering paddle, his eyes tracing imaginary lines between the brilliant points of light. He knows them all by name, their secret stories, their paths across the sky. He is using a celestial map of impossible complexity, a star compass. In your mind's eye, you see him pointing to a rising star on the horizon, aligning the prow of the canoe with it, and holding that course until it rises too high, at which point he seamlessly switches to the next star in the sequence. It is an act of pure, intellectual mastery, a mental feat of geometry and memory. The glamorous illusion is that Polynesian navigation is all about the stars. It's a clean, academic, almost magical system of reading the heavens. But now, as you lie on the deck, a thin mat doing little to cushion you from the hard wood, you notice something unsettling. Clouds are moving in. The thick, grey blanket is being pulled across the sky, swallowing the stars one by one. Soon, the celestial map is gone. The sky is a featureless, black void. By the logic of the glamorous illusion, you should now be lost. The navigator, stripped of his primary tool, should be frantic. But he isn't. He has barely glanced at the obscuring clouds. His posture hasn't changed. His hand is still firm on the steering paddle. The canoe is still holding its course. A silent, black shape moving with purpose through a black sea, under a black sky. How is this possible? Because the shocking reality is that the stars are only one part of the system, and on many nights, they are the least reliable part. The true compass, the one that works in storms, in fog, and on moonless, overcast nights, is not in the sky. It's beneath you. The master navigator has now knelt down. He has pressed his ear to the wood of the hull, much like the old woman, but is listening for something else. Is feeling, with his entire body, the deep, rhythmic pulse of the ocean swells. Remember those vibrations that have become your constant companion. They are his real map. The ocean is never still. It is crossed by multiple wave patterns. The most important of these is the deep ocean swell, generated by powerful, consistent trade winds thousands of miles away. This swell is an ancient, steady traveler. It maintains its direction with incredible consistency over vast distances. It is a straight line drawn across the Pacific. This is your primary bearing, your oceanic longitude. There might be other, more chaotic waves on the surface, whipped up by local winds, but a trained body can filter out that noise and feel the deep, fundamental rhythm. The navigator can feel the angle at which this primary swell is striking the canoe. He knows the direction it should be coming from, and by keeping that angle consistent, he can hold a course with astonishing accuracy. But that's not all. You watch as he motions to another crew member, who lowers his bare body over the side, clinging to the lashings until his genitals are submerged in the water. It seems bizarre, almost comical. But this is not a crude joke. It is a finely tuned scientific instrument. The skin of the testicles is incredibly sensitive to pressure and temperature changes. By feeling the push of the water, the man can detect minute shifts in the direction of the underlying swell, even those that are too subtle to feel through the hull. He is a human gyroscope, a biological compass of astonishing sensitivity. He is part of the canoe's sensory array, feeding the navigator another layer of crucial data. Why this reliance on the body and the water over the seemingly perfect map of the stars? Because the Polynesian worldview was fundamentally empirical and practical. They trusted what was constant. Stars rise and set. They move across the sky. They are obscured by clouds. They are a dynamic, changing map that requires constant recalculation and is often simply unavailable. But the deep ocean swell, born of the great planetary wind systems, is a near constant. It is the true north, or true east, of their watery world. It is always there. To feel it was to be connected to the most fundamental and reliable force in the ocean. The stars were for confirming your course, for fine-tuning it on a clear night. But the swell was for keeping it. To put all your faith in the stars would be like trying to navigate a forest by only looking at the sun. It helps, but it's useless once you're under the canopy. The Polynesians navigated from within the ocean, not by observing it from afar. Their most precious map wasn't written in fire across the sky. It was a rhythmic, invisible energy, a pulse felt in the bones, the ears, and the most sensitive, private parts of the body. It was a compass you could feel, not one you had to see. This reliance on the tangible, on the things you could feel and taste and smell, extended to every aspect of the voyage, especially to the one thing that truly kept you alive, your food. And the reality of that was far from the tropical banquet you might imagine. The deep, steady rhythm of the swell has become the baseline of your existence, a pulse you can feel in your teeth. You've survived the cloudy nights by trusting this invisible map, and now the sun is high in the sky, warming your salt-caked skin. The work is hard bailing, checking these lashings, trimming the sail, and it builds a deep, gnawing hunger in your belly. Your mind drifts to food. You imagine the classic Polynesian feast, a whole pig, roasted in an earth oven, its skin crackling and savory. There are piles of sweet, starky taro and breadfruit, steamed in coconut cream. There are bowls of fresh fish, glistening with lime juice and sea salt. It's a vibrant, delicious, and deeply appealing picture. The glamorous illusion of life on the canoe is that you are sustained by a bounty of the sea, spearing fish from the deck and feasting on fresh catches, a sort of floating tropical picnic. You are, after all, in the middle of one of the richest marine environments on the planet. But then, a crew member begins to distribute the day's meal, and the shocking reality hits your nose before it even reaches your mouth. There is no roasted pig. There is no fresh fish. Catching a fish from a moving canoe with the available technology is incredibly difficult and unreliable. Instead, you are handed a sticky, greyish-white lump wrapped in a pandanus leaf. It has the consistency of thick, cold porridge, and it smells intensely sour, almost like spoiled dough or a very strong, very old cheese. This is your main source of calories. It is fermented breadfruit paste, called mahai or furo. To make it, breadfruit was harvested when ripe, peeled, cored, and then packed into a leaf-lined pit in the ground. It was covered and left to ferment for weeks, sometimes months. The natural yeasts and bacteria would break down the sugars, creating a dense, starky, and acidic paste. This process preserved the food, making it shelf-stable for months, even years. It was, in essence, a carbohydrate pseudo-starter. You take a hesitant bite. The taste is as aggressive as the smell. It's intensely sour, with a pasty, slightly gritty texture. There is no sweetness left, only a profound, acidic tang that makes your jaw ache. It is not delicious. It is not satisfying in the way fresh food is, but it is packed with calories, and its high acidity prevents the growth of harmful bacteria, making it the perfect, stable provision for a long sea voyage. Alongside the sour paste, you might get a few dried bananas, their leathery skins black and wrinkled, their flavor concentrated into a cloying, smoky sweetness. You'll get dried pandanus flour, another staple, which has a slightly nutty but otherwise bland taste. And you get water, carefully rationed, stored in hollowed-out gourds or lengths of bamboo. The water itself, after days sloshing around, often tastes stale and woody. So why this reliance on something so unappetizing? Why not gamble on catching fresh food? The answer lies in a core principle of Polynesian voyaging. You eliminate chance wherever possible. Survival was a game of percentages, and fresh food was a losing bet. Fishing was uncertain. A storm could make it impossible. A run of bad luck could leave you with nothing. Relying on it would be a catastrophic failure of planning. The sour, fermented bread fruit paste, on the other hand, was a guarantee. It was food security. It was a known quantity of calories that would not spoil. The Polynesians were master agriculturalists and food preservationists long before they were master navigators. Their entire society was built on the ability to manage surpluses and shortages. The voyage was simply an extension of this land-based practice. They were packing a pantry, not a lunchbox. The glamorous illusion of living off the ocean's bounty is a romantic fantasy. The reality is that you are living off the preserved bounty of the land you left behind. Every sour, difficult-to-swallow mouthful of maize is a testament to the foresight, planning, and agricultural genius of the people who prepared for this journey. It is the taste of true security. It represents the community's collective effort to ensure the voyagers would have the one thing they absolutely needed: predictable energy. The food wasn't meant to be a joyful feast. It was fuel. It was the gritty, sour, unglamorous taste of life itself. Eating it wasn't a pleasure, but a duty, a solemn act of communion with the people back home whose labor made your journey possible. This food, in its own way, was as sacred as the canoe itself. It was the anchor of life you carried with you. And accepting this strange, sour food was just the first step in conditioning your body for the voyage. An even more profound and visceral transformation was required. You had to empty yourself, literally and spiritually, to become a true creature of the sea. The sour taste of the fermented bread fruit paste still lingers in your mouth. It's a constant reminder that survival out here is about function, not pleasure. Your body is slowly adapting to the rhythm of the waves and the strange diet. You are becoming a creature of the sea, day by day. This transformation, you imagine, is a thing of quiet dignity. The glamorous illusion is one of stoic adaptation. The voyager endures the hardships of the sea with a calm, hardened resolve. He overcomes seasickness through sheer force of will, his body naturally acclimatizing to the new environment. It's a process of spiritual attunement, of finding your sea legs through a gentle, almost meditative process. The body and the ocean slowly learn to dance together, and the voyager becomes one with the rhythms of the water, a picture of serene, effortless grace. It's a clean, romantic, and deeply misleading image. The shocking reality begins on the first day, before you've even lost sight of the high peaks of your home island. The master navigator gathers the new crew members, the ones who have never undertaken a long voyage before. He doesn't give a speech about courage or stars. Instead, he hands each of you a small, carved wooden stick or a feather. The instructions are simple and deeply unsettling. You are to use this object to induce vomiting. You are to purge yourself, systematically and thoroughly. This is not a suggestion. It is a command. It is the first and most critical ritual of the voyage. The deck of the canoe, this sacred vessel, becomes a scene of retching and gagging. It's a loud, messy, and deeply undignified process. The beautiful, sleek canoe is fouled by the contents of your land-based stomach. It's a gross-out moment that shatters any illusion of a serene departure. You watch as experienced voyagers assist the novices, offering a calm word of encouragement as they heave over the side. This is not seen as a moment of weakness or sickness, but as a necessary and sacred act of purification. You must empty yourself of the land. You are expelling not just the last meal you ate on solid ground, but the very essence of that stability. You are vomiting out your connection to the static world, a world where the ground does not move, where your senses are calibrated to a fixed reality. Seasickness, in this context, is not an unfortunate side effect. It is the goal. It is the first step of a radical recalibration of your entire sensory apparatus. Why this deliberate, ritualized purging? Because the Polynesian worldview understood that the human body is a vessel, and to fill it with new knowledge, you must first empty it of the old. Your land legs are a form of ignorance out here. Your land-based sense of balance, your reliance on a stable horizon, these are now liabilities. They create a sensory conflict between what your eyes are seeing, a tilting world, and what your inner ear is feeling, leading to the nausea of seasickness. By forcing yourself to be sick, you are accelerating this process. You are telling your body, in the most visceral way possible, the old rules no longer apply. Let go. Surrender. This act of purging was both deeply practical and profoundly spiritual. On the practical level, it cleansed the stomach, preparing it for the difficult, monotonous diet of fermented paste and dried foods. It got these inevitable, debilitating sickness over with quickly, in a controlled manner, rather than letting it fester for days, leaving you weak and dehydrated. But on a spiritual level, it was an act of humility. It was an admission to the ocean, to the Vaka, and to the gods of the sea, that you were no longer a creature of the land. You were willingly making yourself vulnerable, emptying yourself to be filled with a new kind of awareness. Only once your body had been hollowed out could you truly begin to feel the subtle language of the swells that the old woman on the deck could read so well. Only then could your own bones, your own skin, your own gut, become the sensitive navigational instruments they needed to be. The glamorous illusion is of a stoic hero mastering the sea. The reality is of a humble novice, gagging on a feather, surrendering his land-based identity to the water. It's a messy, uncomfortable, and deeply human moment. It's the understanding that true mastery doesn't come from imposing your will, but from the difficult, often unpleasant, process of letting go. It is the shocking but necessary truth that to find your way across the ocean, you first had to get profoundly sick. You had to learn that the path to knowledge often begins with emptying what you think you already know. This process of emptying, of surrendering, allows you to start perceiving the world in a new way. You start to see that the seemingly empty expanse of water around you is not a void at all, but a rich and complex landscape, full of signs for those who have been properly prepared to read them. Having purged your land-based senses, you are now a clean slate, a hollow vessel ready to be filled with the knowledge of the sea. The world feels different. The canoe's every movement is no longer a lurch that threatens to unbalance you, but a piece of information. You've survived the initial, visceral shock. Now, you look out at the ocean. It is vast, an endless, shimmering sheet of blue, under a vast, empty sky. From a modern perspective, this is the great challenge of the Pacific, its sheer, terrifying emptiness. The glamorous illusion is that the Polynesian navigator succeeded by crossing a void. He aimed his canoe at a tiny, unseen speck hundreds of miles away and, through the sheer brilliance of his celestial navigation, managed to hit it. The ocean itself is presented as a featureless blue desert, a dangerous blank space between 2 points of land. The story is one of conquering this emptiness, of drawing a straight line across nothingness. But as your senses sharpen, you begin to understand the shocking reality. The navigator is not crossing a void. He is traveling through a rich, complex, and dynamic landscape. The empty sea is a tapestry of signs, a living world filled with subtle clues. The idea of the ocean as a uniform, blue nothingness is the illusion of a land dweller. To the navigator, it is as full of landmarks and signposts as a forest. You begin to learn to see it as he does. He points to a faint change in the water's color, a subtle shift from a deep, sterile indigo to a slightly greener, more vibrant blue. To your untrained eye, it's almost imperceptible. To him, it indicates a change in current, a different body of water with more phytoplankton, a sign that the ecosystem here is different. This is a boundary line, as real as a river on a map. He shows you how to read the clouds. You've always seen clouds as just clouds, random, fluffy shapes, but he teaches you to see the stationary clouds that hover on the horizon, even on a windy day. These are not moving with the weather. They are land-hugging clouds, formed by the moisture rising from the warm, verdant land of an island that is still far below the visual horizon. An island, with its vegetation and daytime heat, creates its own small-scale weather system. Seeing a fixed, stationary bank of clouds in a moving sky is one of the first and most certain signs that you are approaching land, sometimes a full day before you can see it. Then you learn to read the life in the water. Remember the children watching for birds. Their observations are now part of a complex matrix of data. A single frigate bird is a curiosity. A pair of them, flying with purpose, is a suggestion. A whole flock of them, returning in a straight line at dusk, is a certainty. You know that somewhere in the direction they are flying lies their roosting place, an island. You learn to distinguish between the deep water fish and the reef fish that sometimes stray further out. You even learn to read the debris. A random, floating coconut is just a coconut. But a floating pandanus leaf, or a piece of wood that is not riddled with deep ocean shipworms, is a message. It tells you that it has not been in the water long. It has come from a nearby shore. Why was this rich, detailed view of the ocean so central to their success? Because the Polynesian worldview was holistic. It did not see this world as a collection of separate, disconnected things, land, sea, sky, animal, but as a single, interconnected system where everything was a sign of something else. An island was not just a piece of rock and soil. It was a force that projected its presence for miles around. It changed the color of the water. It generated its own clouds. It was a magnet for specific kinds of birds and marine life. It shed leaves and branches into the surrounding currents. The navigator wasn't just looking for a single object, the island. He was looking for the island's aura, its vast, invisible footprint on the surrounding environment. The glamorous illusion is of a lone canoe against an empty sea. The shocking reality is a canoe traveling through a sea that is constantly speaking, whispering hints and clues. The genius of the navigator was not in his ability to cross a void, but in his ability to read a language. It was the language of birds, of clouds, of currents, of subtle shifts in color and the light. The emptiness of the ocean is a modern fiction, a product of flying over it at 30,000 feet or crossing it in a steel ship that insulates you from its realities. For the Polynesians, the ocean was not a space to be crossed, but a world to be inhabited and understood. The voyage was a process of constant observation, a deep and sustained conversation with the living sea. This worldview transformed the terrifying void into a familiar landscape. This transformation wasn't just intellectual. It was physical. The knowledge of this landscape wasn't just in the navigator's head, it was embedded in the most sensitive instrument on the entire vessel, his own body. You're beginning to read the signs now. The stationary cloud on the horizon, the flight path of a homeward-bound turn, these clues are starting to transform the empty blue desert into a landscape rich with meaning. Your mind is adapting. But the ultimate tool of navigation is still something you're learning to trust. His amorous illusion of navigation is that it's an intellectual exercise. It's about charts, instruments, and calculations. You picture the great European explorers with their astrolabes, their sextants, their magnetic compasses, and their meticulously drawn maps. Knowledge is externalized. It's recorded on paper, inscribed on brass instruments. The navigator is a scientist, a geometer who imposes a grid of logic and mathematics onto the world. His body is just the thing that carries his brain from one place to another. Success is measured by the accuracy of his tools and the precision of his calculations. But as you huddle on the deck through another long, chilly night, you witness the shocking reality of Polynesian navigation. The master navigator isn't consulting a device. He is the device. The most important map he has is not made of stars or clouds, but of flesh and bone. You watch him as he seems to doze, his body wedged into a particular corner of the canoe, his head resting against a wooden strut. He looks asleep, but his stillness is one of intense concentration. He is using his entire body as a sensory antenna. Remember how the swells beneath the canoe hold a steady course. He is feeling that constant, rhythmic pulse not just as a single input, but as a complex symphony of pressures. He can feel the lift of the bow, the yaw and slew as the wave passes under the twin hulls, the slight twist as the stern dips into the trough. He is feeling the swell in his jawbone, through the resonant cavity of his skull. He feels it in his spine, a constant upward pressure. He feels it in his gut, a faint lurch that a land dweller would call nausea, but he calls information. This is not a vague, mystical feeling. It is a highly developed, empirical skill. He has memorized the exact feeling of the canoe when it is on the correct heading relative to the primary swell. He knows what it feels like in his teeth, in his testicles, in the small of his back, when the vaka is pointed towards his destination star, even when that star is hidden. If the helmsman, fighting across current, lets the canoe drift just a few degrees off course, the navigator will feel it instantly. The rhythm will be wrong. The pressure on his left side versus his right will be subtly different. The period between the wave crests will feel slightly longer or shorter. He won't need to look at the sky or the water. He will simply murmur a correction a little more to the right, feel the lift on your shoulder, and the helmsman will adjust until the navigator's body once again feels the familiar, correct rhythm. Why cultivate this intensely physical, internal form of knowledge? Because the Polynesian worldview did not separate mind and body. The body was not a crude vessel for the intellect. It was the primary organ of perception, a tool for thinking and knowing. Knowledge, especially the most sacred and important knowledge, was not something you wrote down in a book. It was something you embodied. It was muscle memory on a profound scale. To memorize a star path was not just to learn a sequence of names, it was to memorize the corresponding physical sensation of the ocean swells for every leg of that journey. This is why the training for a navigator took decades. It was a process of conditioning the body, until it became an instrument of almost supernatural sensitivity. A paper chart can get wet and tear. A magnetic compass is useless near volcanic islands with high iron content. But the body is always there. The ocean swell is always there. The knowledge, once embodied, could not be lost, stolen, or destroyed. The glamorous illusion is of a navigator with a map. The shocking reality is of a navigator who is the map. His body is a living archive of every swell pattern, every current, every journey he has ever taken. This knowledge is so deeply ingrained that it is subconscious, intuitive. He doesn't have to think about it, any more than you have to. Think about how to walk. This physical empathy with the canoe and the ocean is the core of his genius. It is a level of attunement that is almost impossible for a modern, disembodied person to comprehend. We are used to outsourcing our senses to our phones, to GPS. The Polynesian navigator insourced everything. He trusted the finely tuned, infinitely complex and sensitive instrument he was born with. This deep, physical connection to the world leads to a profound philosophical difference in the very act of discovery. You are not a conqueror, finding a new land. Your perspective must shift. You must understand that the island is not your destination, but your origin. The island is the one that finds you. Your body has become an instrument. It is no longer just a passenger on this groaning, living canoe. It is part of the navigational system. The constant hum of the primary swell is a compass you feel in your bones. The stationary clouds on the horizon are a landmark you can read from, 100 miles away. You are part of the process now, and as you get closer to your goal, you can feel the excitement building. You are on a voyage of discovery. The glamorous illusion, baked into our language and our history books, is that you are an explorer who will discover an island. It's an active, aggressive concept. You are the subject. The island is the object. You, the hero, sail across the sea and find this passive piece of land waiting for you. The maps will show an arrow pointing from your origin to your destination. It is a narrative of conquest, of human will imposed upon the world. The act of finding is an assertion of power. But as you spend more and more time living by the ocean's logic, you begin to understand the shocking reality of the Polynesian perspective. It's a subtle but profound shift in thinking. You are not finding the island. The island is finding you. The master navigator's entire strategy is not one of aiming and shooting, but of placing the canoe in the correct position so that the island will reveal itself. Think back to all the signs you've learned to read. The stationary cloud, the returning birds, the floating debris, the change in the water's color, the reflected swell pattern that your body can now feel. These are not just clues. They are the island itself, projecting its existence outwards. The navigator's skill is in identifying this target zone, this aura that the island radiates, and sailing into it. This concept is encapsulated in a beautiful and powerful piece of oral tradition. Navigators were taught that as they sailed, they were not moving across a static sea. Instead, they held the canoe still, and with their knowledge, their chance, and their connection to the elements, they pulled the island towards them. The island is the active agent. You are the patient, receptive one. It is a complete reversal of the Western concept of discovery. It's not an act of conquest, but one of deep alignment. You are not hunting the island, you are making yourself visible and available to it. You are entering its domain and waiting for it to welcome you. This philosophy explains the seemingly relaxed confidence of the navigator. He is not stressed about hitting a tiny target. He is confident that he can get his canoe into the broad, 100-mile wide net of the island's influence, and once inside that net, the island's own signs will guide him home. Why this profound difference in worldview? Because the Polynesian relationship with the natural world was not one of dominion, but of kinship. Islands were not just lumps of rock. They were ancestors. They were living entities with their own power, their own personality. You did not discover an ancestor, you paid them a visit. You approached with respect, not with a flag to plant. This philosophy is woven into the very fabric of the navigation system. The system is designed to be receptive, not aggressive. It is based on listening, feeling, and observing, not on calculating and imposing. It removes the ego from the act of wayfinding. The navigator is not a singular hero conquering the void. He is a humble servant, a priest, who knows the rituals required to call the island out of the sea. The glamorous illusion is of a ship's captain, spyglass to his eye, shouting land, ho, as if he has just created it through his own will. The shocking reality is of a navigator, eyes closed, feeling the faint, reflected swell pattern in his bones, murmuring, "She is here. She feels our presence." It's a shift from a language of ballistics to a language of magnetism. You are not firing the canoe like a cannonball at a target. You are turning your canoe into a compass needle and allowing the powerful magnet of the island to pull you in. This changes everything. It means failure is not a matter of missing the target, but of failing to perform the proper rituals, of failing to listen. And it means success is not a moment of triumphant shouting, but one of quiet, humble recognition. This quiet recognition begins not with the eyes, but with the nose. The first definitive proof that the island has accepted your presence and is ready to reveal itself is not a sight, but a smell, carried to you on the gentle morning breeze. The feeling is undeniable now. The island is close. You have entered its aura. The reflected swells, once a ghostly tremor felt only by the master navigator, are now a tangible rhythm that even your novice body can perceive. The birds are no longer just passing curiosities, they are a constant presence, wheeling and calling around the canoe. You can see the deep, stationary bank of clouds on the horizon, a permanent feature that confirms your course. Your eyes are straining, scanning the horizon for that first, faint smudge of land. The glamorous illusion of arrival is purely visual. It's the cinematic moment. The lookout, perched high on a mast, sees a distant shape and cries out. The crew rushes to the side of the ship, pointing and cheering. The island appears as a low line on the horizon, slowly growing larger and more detailed. It's a moment of triumph, a reward for the eyes after weeks of staring at nothing but water. But on this groaning, living canoe, the shocking reality of arrival bypasses your eyes completely. The final, irrefutable confirmation that you have succeeded comes to you on the wind, through your nose. It happens in the deep, cool hours just before dawn. The navigator has instructed the crew to be still and quiet. The air is heavy with moisture. The gentle breeze, a land breeze, is flowing out from the still unseen island. And on that breeze, it comes. The smell. It is the most beautiful, welcome and life-affirming scent you have ever experienced. It is the smell of wet earth, of damp soil after a rainstorm. It is the rich, loamy perfume of decaying vegetation, the scent of 1,000 generations of fallen leaves turning back into soil. It is the sweet, cloying fragrance of flowers, perhaps hibiscus or gardenia opening in the cool night air. It is the green, sharp smell of crushed ferns and grasses. After weeks of smelling nothing but salt, the sour tang of fermented food and the stale organic funk of the canoe's bilge, this scent is an overwhelming, intoxicating wave of pure life. It is the smell of home, even if it is a home you have never seen before. It is the smell of stability, of fertility, of solid ground. Your eyes still see nothing but the dark, heaving sea, but your nose tells you, with absolute certainty, that you are saved. Land is near. The navigator smiles, a deep, knowing smile. He didn't need this final confirmation his body has known for hours, but it is a gift to the crew, a sensory reward that erases the hardships of the journey. He has delivered you not just to a place, but to a fragrance. Why is the sense of smell so critical in this final phase of the journey? Because it embodies the Polynesian understanding of how an island projects its essence. An island is a living, breathing thing. It exhales. During the day, the sun warms the land and the air rises, pulling in a cooler sea breeze from the ocean. But at night, the opposite happens. The land cools faster than the surrounding water, and the denser, cooler air on the island flows downhill and out to sea, creating a land breeze. This gentle, offshore wind is a physical extension of the island, a current of air carrying its very soul, its molecules, its pollen, its signature sent out across the water for miles. A skilled navigator knows how to position the canoe to catch this pre-dawn exhalation. He aims for a point upwind of the island, letting its own breath guide him the final few miles. The glamorous illusion is of seeing your destination. The shocking reality is of smelling it first. It is a far more intimate and profound encounter. To see something is to observe it from a distance. To smell it is to take it inside your own body. To breathe it into your lungs. It's an act of communion. The island is sharing its life force with you before you have even set foot on its shores. This sensory experience reinforces the philosophy you've been learning. You are not a conqueror, but a guest. The island is offering you a welcome, sending out its perfume as a sign of greeting. It is the most delicate and beautiful land, imaginable. It is not a shout, but a whisper. This fragrant greeting is a moment of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. It feels like the end of the story, the happily ever after. But the journey is not quite over. The dangers have not all passed. This fragrant welcome mat, this beautiful scent on the wind, leads you to a shore that holds its own set of protocols, its own spiritual and political tensions. Arrival is not a party, it's a negotiation. The scent of wet earth and flowers has filled you with a profound sense of relief. It's the smell of life, of success. As the sun rises, the island finally materializes, first as a dark smudge, then as a high, green peak veiled in mist. You can see the white line of surf breaking on a distant reef. You have made it. The glamorous illusion of arrival is a scene of joyous celebration. The voyagers, weary but triumphant, are greeted on the beach by smiling, welcoming natives. There are garlands of flowers placed around their necks. There is a great feast, the one you imagined weeks ago, with roasted pig and piles of fresh fruit. It is a scene of immediate, unconditional acceptance. The newcomers are welcomed into the fold, their perilous journey rewarded with instant community and abundance. It's a beautiful, romantic vision of human connection, a staple of travelogues and adventure films. But as your canoe carefully navigates the treacherous passage through the reef, you begin to sense that the reality is far more tense and complex. From the shore, people have gathered. They are not smiling and waving less. They are armed. Men stand, with spears and war clubs, their bodies rigid, their faces stern and watchful. There are no cheers of welcome, only an intense, unnerving silence. This is the shocking reality. Arrival is not a party, but a tense and potentially lethal spiritual and political standoff. You are not presumed to be a friend. You are an unknown entity, a potential threat emerging from the sea, the realm of gods and spirits. Your arrival is a disruption of the highest order. Your canoe drops its stone anchor in the calm water of the lagoon, but no one makes a move to go ashore. The master navigator, now acting as a priest and diplomat, stands at the prow. He begins to chant. It is a long, formal, and highly intricate chant, a pihi. He is not speaking to the people on the shore. He is addressing the island itself, its gods, its spirits, and its ancestors. He is announcing your presence and declaring your intentions. He recites his own genealogy, tracing his lineage back through generations of navigators and chiefs, establishing his identity and his right to travel the sea. He recites the genealogy of the canoe, treating the vessel itself as a living being with a noble bloodline. He is, in essence, presenting his credentials to the spiritual powers that govern this new place. He is asking for permission to land. On the shore, a local priest or chief listens intently. He is not just listening to the words, but to the rhythm, the cadence, the very spirit of the chant. Does it sound right? Is the genealogy correct and powerful? Does the navigator carry the maneth spiritual authority and power of a legitimate traveller, or is he a pretender, a castaway, or worse, the scout for a raiding party? The entire future of your crew hangs on this performance. A single mistake, a faltering voice, a misremembered name in the lineage could be interpreted as a bad omen or an insult. It could mean you are left to starve in the lagoon, or met with a volley of spears if you attempt to land. Why this intense, ritualized scrutiny? Because in the Polynesian worldview, every new arrival was a source of potential danger, both physical and spiritual. Physically, you could be a warrior come to steal land and resources. Spiritually, you could be carrying bad mana, a spiritual contagion that could bring misfortune, disease, or famine to the island. You have come from the Po, the darkness, the void of the sea. You must be carefully vetted before you can be allowed into the Ao, the world of light, life, and everyday society. The armed men on the beach are not just a welcoming party, they are a quarantine. The chants are a form of spiritual customs inspection. You must prove you are not a threat to the delicate balance of the island's spiritual and political ecosystem. Only after the navigator's chant is complete, and only if it is deemed acceptable, will the local priest respond with a chant of his own. It might be a chant of cautious welcome, or it might be a series of probing questions, testing the navigator's knowledge further. This exchange can go on for hours. It is a high-stakes negotiation where the currency is genealogy and sacred poetry. If, and only if, the locals are satisfied, will the weapons be lowered. A tentative invitation to land will be offered. Even then, the first encounters are formal and rigid, governed by strict protocols of gift-giving and ritual speeches. The feast and the less might come, but only after days of careful integration. The glamorous illusion is of an open-armed, unconditional welcome. The shocking reality is a tense, silent confrontation where your life depends on the perfect recitation of ancient poetry. It's a reminder that knowledge, in this world, was not just a tool for navigation. It was the key to your very survival upon arrival. This knowledge was the most valuable treasure a person or a lineage could possess, and it was guarded with a jealousy that is hard to comprehend. The tension of that ritual arrival still hangs in the air. The spears have been lowered, a cautious peace has been established, all because your navigator possessed the correct words, the correct lineage, the correct mana. He proved his worth. This knowledge of chants, of genealogies, of star paths and swell patterns is clearly a form of immense power. The glamorous illusion is that this kind of profound wisdom would be shared for the good of all. You might imagine schools of navigation, where wise elders sit with eager youths, drawing star maps in the sand, passing down the sacred knowledge openly to ensure the survival and expansion of their people. You picture knowledge as a communal resource, a library open to anyone with the talent and desire to learn. It's a democratic ideal, where the secrets of the sea are a gift to be passed from one generation to the next, a celebrated part of the public heritage. But now that you are safely on land, you begin to see the shocking reality. The navigator does not teach openly. The knowledge is not for everyone. It is a jealously guarded secret, a form of intellectual property more valuable than any piece of land or any stone ants. It is owned by a specific lineage, a single family or clan. The master navigator, your tufunga, will teach it only to his chosen successor, usually his son or nephew. The training is not done in a public square, but in secret, often in a special, sacred building called a Wananga or House of Learning. The lessons are conducted at night, away from prying eyes and eavesdropping ears. The knowledge is transmitted orally, through endless recitation and memorization, ensuring that it can never be stolen or copied. If an outsider, even someone from a friendly neighboring tribe, were to ask the navigator to teach them the path to a distant island, the request would be met with a stunning silence or an outright refusal. To share that knowledge would be to give away his family's power. It would be like giving a rival corporation the keys to your most valuable patent. A star path to a new island was a trade route, a source of valuable materials like high-quality stone for tools or rare feathers for ceremonial dress. It was an escape route in times of war or famine. To control the knowledge of that route was to control the destiny of your people. Giving it away would be an act of unimaginable folly. Why this intense secrecy? Because the Polynesian world, for all its beauty and philosophical depth, was a place of fierce competition and political maneuvering. Mana, or spiritual power and authority, was not a static quality. It had to be constantly demonstrated and protected. The navigator's knowledge was a primary source of his lineage's mana. It proved their divine favor, their intellectual superiority, and their unique relationship with the gods of the sea. This knowledge was their inheritance, their crown jewels. To protect it, they developed elaborate systems of secrecy. Sometimes, this knowledge was encoded in complex allegorical chants or songs, where the true meaning of a reference to a certain fish or a type of cloud would be known only to the initiated. An outsider could listen to the song and hear a simple creation myth, while the navigator's apprentice would hear a set of precise instructions for a voyage. This created a society where knowledge was stratified. There was the common knowledge that everyone shared: how to fish on the reef, how to plant taro. And then there was the deep knowledge, the wananga, which was the exclusive property of the elite. The glamorous illusion is of a wise, benevolent teacher sharing his gifts. The shocking reality is of a powerful guild master protecting his trade secrets from industrial espionage. This secrecy had a dark side. A navigator would sometimes deliberately teach a rival an incorrect or incomplete star path, sending them off to their doom in the empty ocean simply to eliminate a political threat. Knowledge was a weapon, and it was wielded with ruthless precision. This intense secrecy and the high stakes of political rivalry meant that the navigator carried an immense burden. The value of his knowledge was directly proportional to its success rate. He and his lineage reaped the rewards of successful voyages, prestige, wealth, political power. But this system also meant there was a terrible, unspoken price for getting it wrong. The consequence of failure was far more than just a single lost canoe. It was a catastrophe on a generational scale. The navigator's status is secure, for now. His secret, powerful knowledge has successfully guided you to this new land, and his lineage's mana is reaffirmed. He is the hero of the hour, a man whose intellectual property has paid off handsomely in the form of survival and opportunity. The glamorous illusion of these voyages often focuses exclusively on the successes. We hear the grand stories of the settlement of Hawaii, of Rapa Nui, of Aotearoa. History is written by the victors, and in this case, the victors are those who arrived. The stories are epic poems of triumph against the odds. The long, perilous journey is framed as a heroic prelude to the glorious foundation of a new society. Failure, in this narrative, is a footnote, a minor setback, a few unlucky souls lost to a storm. It's the cost of doing business, a sad but ultimately insignificant part of the grand, successful tapestry of expansion. But as you settle into this new life, you begin to hear whispered stories, fragmented accounts of other canoes that set sail and were never seen again. You start to understand the shocking, unspoken reality of failure. Getting lost was not a noble tragedy. It was a descent into a slow, grim, and deeply horrifying fate, followed by a profound and lasting shame that would stain the memory of the navigator and his entire family for generations. Imagine being on that other canoe. The one where the navigator made a mistake. A few degrees off course, a misread swell, a week of overcast skies at a critical moment. At first, there is no panic. The navigator is confident, his authority absolute. But the days turn into weeks. The sour breadfruit paste runs low. The water, stored in gourds, begins to take on a foul taste. The gnawing hunger becomes a constant, burning ache in your belly. The first to die are the very young and the very old. There are no dramatic burials at sea. The bodies are simply, quietly, slipped over the side. The canoe, your living ark of survival, becomes a floating coffin. The despair is a physical presence, thicker than the humid air. The groaning of the canoe's lashings no longer sounds like a living thing, but like the moans of the dying. The crew, once a single sensory organ, becomes a collection of starving, isolated individuals. Fights break out over the last scrap of mouldy food. The ultimate taboo, cannibalism, becomes a horrifying, desperate possibility, a last-ditch effort to survive just one more day in the hope of smelling that phantom scent of land. But it never comes. The canoe drifts aimlessly, a ghost ship crewed by gaunt, hollow-eyed spectres until the last person succumbs to starvation, dehydration, or simple, soul-crushing despair. Why was this fate so terrifyingly absolute? Because, as you know, the Pacific is not a pond. It is a vast, empty wilderness of water. There was no one to rescue you. No one was looking for you. The canoe that missed its target would not just sail past it, The complex system of winds and currents that sped you on your way to one island would just as efficiently carry you away from it, into a truly empty quadrant of the ocean. To be lost was to be erased from the world. But the horror did not end with the death of the crew. Back on the home island, the navigator's failure brought a deep and enduring shame upon his entire lineage. His mana was not just diminished, it was shattered. He had proven himself to be a fraud. The gods had rejected him. His knowledge was false. His family, once respected and powerful, would become pariahs. They would lose their political standing, their land rights. They might even be exiled. The failure of one man could lead to the social and political ruin of his entire bloodline for generations to come. The glamorous illusion is of heroic adventurers. The shocking reality is of a system with a zero-tolerance policy for error. The stakes were absolute, glory and power in success, or a grim death and generational shame in failure. This immense pressure is what made the navigator's knowledge so precious and so secret. It's what drove the decades of intense, brutal training. Every single detail had to be perfect. Every contingency had to be planned for. There was no room for good enough. It had to be flawless. This unforgiving reality separates Polynesian voyaging from almost any other form of exploration. There was no turning back, no resupply, no margin for error. You arrived. Or you vanished. And this incredible pressure, this all-or-nothing gamble, was not shouldered by the voyagers alone. The foundation for every single one of these high-stakes journeys, the true anchor that made them possible, was not on the canoe at all. It was left behind, on the shore. The weight of that all-or-nothing gamble sits heavily in your mind. You now understand the immense pressure on the navigator, the fine line between becoming a celebrated ancestor and a forgotten ghost. The entire story of the voyage, as it's usually told, is intensely masculine. It's the story of the Tufunga, the male navigator and priest, of the male chiefs who command the expedition, of the male warriors who stand ready on the deck. The glamorous illusion is that the voyage is an exclusively male endeavor. The women are depicted as passive cargo, huddled on the deck with the children, their role simply to be transported from one place to another. They are the dependents, the beneficiaries of the men's courage and skill. Their story is a footnote, their contribution unseen and unrecorded, their presence on the canoe merely a biological necessity for populating the new land. But as you live in this new community, built by the survivors of your voyage, you begin to see the shocking, fundamental reality. The entire enterprise, from the first conception of the voyage to its successful conclusion, was built upon the knowledge, labor, and authority of women. They were not the anchor that held the men back. They were the anchor left on shore, the deep, stable foundation that made the entire high-risk venture possible in the first place. Let's pull back the curtain on the preparations for the voyage. Who wove the sails? It was the women. They spent months, even years, harvesting pandanus leaves, stripping them, drying them, and then weaving them into the vast, tough, triangular mats that would power the canoe. This was not simple craftwork. It was a highly skilled engineering task. A poorly woven sail, one that caught the wind unevenly or tore in a gale, would mean certain death for the crew. The lives of everyone on board depended on the quality of the women's weaving. Who prepared the food, the sour, life-saving fermented breadfruit paste? It was the women. They managed the breadfruit groves, harvested the fruit at the peak of its ripeness, and oversaw the long, slow fermentation process in the communal pits. They were the masters of food preservation, the chemists and quartermasters of the expedition. An error in their calculations, not preparing enough, or not ensuring it was properly preserved, would doom the voyage before it even began. They were the ones who calculated the precise caloric needs for 100 people over a 2-month journey. The men's survival was entirely dependent on the women's agricultural and culinary expertise. And what of the most valuable cargo on board? Not the stone adzes or the food, but the plants and animals needed to start a new life. The taro corms, the sugarcane, the breadfruit saplings, the chickens, the dogs, the pigs. Who was responsible for tending these? It was the women. They were the botanists, the veterinarians, the keepers of the genetic heritage of their people. They carefully selected the breeding pairs and the hardiest plant stock. On board the canoe, in the cramped, damp and chaotic conditions, they were responsible for keeping this precious living cargo alive. Why was this foundational role so often overlooked? Because Polynesian society, while often led publicly by male chiefs, was frequently built upon matrilineal principles. Land, titles, and identity were often passed down through the mother's line. A woman of high rank, a Faiu in some cultures, held immense authority. She might not have stood at the prow and made the chant, but she was the one who authorized the voyage in the first place. Her approval was essential. Her blessing carried immense mana. The men were often the public face of power, the does, but the women were the source and conduit of that power, the bedrock of society. The voyage was not an escape from this structure, but an extension of it. The men were the tip of the spear, but the women were the strong, flexible shaft that gave it its power and direction. The glamorous illusion is of a canoe full of men, with a few women along for the ride. The shocking realities of a venture planned, supplied, and spiritually sanctioned by women, executed by men. Without the women's labor in weaving the sails, preserving the food, and managing the live cargo, the canoe would have been nothing but a hollow log with a few hungry men in it, destined to fail. They were the logisticians, the engineers, the agriculturalists, and the keepers of the flame of life. They were the ones who ensured that if the men succeeded in calling the island from the sea, they would have the tools to build a new world when they arrived. The anchor left on shore was not a weight, it was the launching point, the source of all stability and strength. This incredible, symbiotic system of voyaging and settlement was so successful that it eventually led to its own conclusion. The great age of expansion did not end in a mysterious collapse, but in a quiet, logical success. You are a part of this new world now, a world built from the knowledge of the navigator, the labor of the women, and the courage of the entire crew. You have seen how this intricate system of voyaging works, a delicate balance of secret knowledge, communal effort, and immense risk. The story of Polynesia is the story of these journeys, repeated over and over, spreading humanity across the largest ocean on Earth. The glamorous illusion is that this age of voyaging ended in some kind of dramatic collapse or mysterious decline. We have this romantic image of a lost civilization, a people who once possessed the most sophisticated navigational technology on the planet and then, for some unknown reason, forgot it. We imagine a sudden end, a final voyage that never returned, a cataclysm that erased the knowledge and left future generations stranded on their islands, staring out at a sea they could no longer cross. This narrative of a lost golden age is compelling. It's a mystery that historians love to debate. But the shocking reality is far less dramatic and, in its own way, far more satisfying. The great age of long-distance, migratory voyaging didn't end in failure. It ended in success. It stopped because it had worked. The primary goal of these immense, high-risk journeys was not exploration for its own sake, it was settlement. It was about finding new, uninhabited land to relieve population pressure, to escape political conflict, or to secure new resources. For centuries, this was a winning strategy. The Pacific, for all its emptiness, contained a vast number of habitable islands. The system worked. A canoe would set out, find a new island, and a new community would be born. The ocean, while vast, is not infinite. Eventually, almost every single island that could be found and settled was. From the coast of Asia to the shores of South America, from the subantarctic islands of New Zealand to the northern tip of the Hawaiian archipelago, the Polynesians had found it all. The great, empty spaces on the map had been filled in. The game had been won. Once an island group like Hawaii or New Zealand was fully settled, the primary motivation for launching these incredibly dangerous, expensive, and high-risk voyages simply disappeared. Why would a chief risk dozens of his people, his most valuable canoe, and his own family's mana on a desperate, 1,000-mile journey to find a new island when there were no new islands left to find? The focus of society shifted inward. Instead of looking outward across the ocean, people began to focus on developing the land they now had. The epic, long-distance voyages of migration were replaced by shorter, inter-island voyages of trade and communication within established archipelagos. The knowledge was not necessarily lost, but the specific application for 1,000-mile migratory journeys fell into disuse. The Varka became smaller, more specialized for travel between known islands, for fishing and for warfare with their new neighbors. The star paths to distant, mythical homelands like Hawaii became the stuff of legend and religious ceremony rather than practical navigational charts. It wasn't a forgetting. It was a logical adaptation to a changed reality. The job was done. Why do we prefer the narrative of a mysterious collapse? Because it fits a familiar Western trope of rise and fall, of golden ages and dark ages. We are fascinated by the idea of lost knowledge, of ancient secrets disappearing into the mists of time. It allows us to see ourselves as the rediscoverers of this knowledge, positioning our own explorers and anthropologists as the heroes who solved the mystery. But the Polynesian reality is one of continuity and adaptation. They didn't fail. They succeeded so completely that the original strategy became obsolete. It's like a company that perfects a certain technology, captures 100 of the market, and then shifts its resources from aggressive expansion to internal development and management. It's not a collapse, it's the natural, successful maturation of a civilization. The glamorous illusion is of a tragic, forgotten art. The shocking reality is of a mission so comprehensively accomplished that it was no longer needed in its original form. The silence of the great ocean lanes was not the sound of failure, but the quiet hum of success. The canoes were not rotting on the beaches because the people had forgotten how to build them, but because their primary purpose to find new land had been fulfilled. The final frontier had been reached. The great migration was over. But the knowledge itself, that deep, embodied wisdom of the sea, did not die. It was not lost forever. It simply fell dormant, a seed waiting in the dry earth for a new season, waiting for a new generation to feel the call of the empty ocean and ask the old questions once again. The ghost of the ancient navigator was never truly gone. The great migration is over. The silence that fell across the vast ocean routes was the sound of a mission accomplished. The canoes now sail shorter, more familiar paths between the islands of their own archipelago. The epic star paths to distant, unknown lands have become sacred stories, their practical use fading as generations are born and die on the same volcanic soil. The glamorous illusion is that this is the end of the story. The knowledge, no longer practiced in its most extreme form, withers away. The Tufunga, the master navigator, becomes a figure of myth, like a knight from an age of chivalry, a romantic, historical artifact whose skills are no longer relevant in a changed world. The chain of transmission is broken, the secrets lost, forever, preserved only in the garbled chants and confusing legends collected by European anthropologists. The story concludes with the quiet tragedy of a forgotten genius. But the shocking reality is that the knowledge never truly died. It was not a fragile, written text that could be burned or lost. Remember, this was knowledge that was embodied, carried in the bones, the muscles, and the instincts of the people. It was encoded in the very structure of their languages and their worldview. And so it persisted, not in the open, but in quiet corners, in fishing families who still used the stars and swells to find their way to offshore banks, in the oral traditions of certain lineages who never completely let go of the old stories. The ghost of the navigator was always there, waiting. And in the 20th century, against all odds, that ghost was brought back to life. The catalyst was a quiet, unassuming man from a remote island in Micronesia named Morpialag. By the 1970s, the academic world had largely concluded that the long-distance, targeted voyages of the Polynesians were impossible without instruments. The dominant theory was that the islands had been settled by accident, by canoes full of helpless fishermen blown off course. The Polynesians, this theory argued, were lucky drifters, not master navigators. But a small group of researchers and cultural leaders in Hawaii refused to believe this. They built a full-scale replica of a voyaging canoe, the Kli. They had the vessel, the crew, the passion. But they had a problem. They had no navigator. The knowledge had been dormant for so long in Hawaii that no one was left who knew how to guide the canoe across the open ocean. So they searched. Their search led them outside of Polynesia to the tiny island of Satu'ul, where Morpialag still practiced the ancient, non-instrumental art of wayfinding, a tradition that had never been broken. Moore was not Polynesian, but his methods were part of the same great Pacific tradition. He agreed to help. In 1976, he navigated the Kli from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey of over 2,500 miles, without a single modern instrument. No compass, no sextant, no charts, no GPS. He used only the stars, the sun, the moon, the swells, the birds, the clouds, the same landscape of signs you have been learning about. He faced ridicule from the Western academic establishment, but he succeeded. He called the island from the sea. Why was this so revolutionary? Because Moore's voyage was a stunning, irrefutable act of resurrection. He proved that the lost art was not lost at all. He demonstrated, in the most practical way imaginable, that the oral traditions were not myths, but precise, scientific textbooks. He was the living embodiment of the knowledge that a navigator is the instrument. He would sleep on the deck, feeling the swells, waking only when the rhythm changed. He was the shocking reality, made manifest in the modern world, a direct challenge to the glamorous illusion of accidental drift. More importantly, Moore did something his ancestors would never have done. He broke the ancient rule of secrecy. He saw that the knowledge was on the verge of extinction, and he made the courageous decision to teach it. He taught a new generation of Hawaiians, most notably a man named Nano Thompson, the ancient art. He shared the secrets, passing the sacred knowledge from his lineage to a new one, across cultures, to save it from oblivion. The successful voyage of the Hawaiian sparked a cultural renaissance across the entire Pacific. The knowledge, once shared, exploded. Other island nations built their own canoes. They relearned the old ways. The silent ocean lanes began to echo once more with the chants of navigators. The ghost had returned, not as a whisper from the past, but as a living, breathing force in the present. The navigator's art, once the most jealously guarded secret, became a symbol of shared Pan-Pacific identity, a source of immense pride and cultural renewal. The canoe, once a tool of migration, became a floating classroom, a vessel for reconnecting with the ancestors and reclaiming a heritage that had been dismissed and nearly forgotten. A knowledge that never died is now more alive and more widely shared than it has been for centuries. And so, my dear friend, our own journey together is drawing to a close. The canoe has reached the shore, the story has been told, and the gentle pull of sleep is beckoning. The world of the ancient sea, with its subtle signs and its deep, quiet wisdom, begins to recede. The groaning of the canoe's lashings softens into the whisper of the wind outside your window, and the rhythmic pulse of the ocean swells melts into the steady, slow beat of your own resting heart. You have felt the chill of the night watch and the warmth of the rising sun on your face. You have smelled the sour paste of survival and the sweet perfume of land on the morning breeze. You have learned that the greatest maps are not made of paper, but of memory and bone, and that the most profound discoveries are made not with the eyes, but with a quiet and receptive spirit. The journey is over, but the peace it has brought you remains. Let that peace settle over you now, as soft and as comforting as a familiar blanket. Let go of all the day's tensions, all the worries and lists, and allow yourself to drift on this calm, quiet tide. The voyage is complete. You are safe. You are home. There is nothing left to do now but rest and to dream. End of script. Sweet dreams.